Why does love feel so close in your imagination, yet so threatening when it finally comes near? You may believe you want connection with all your heart. You may dream about being chosen, understood, held, and seen. You may imagine the message, the voice, the presence, the person who finally makes your heart feel safe. But then, when something real begins to approach, something unexpected happens inside you. Your body tightens. Your thoughts become louder. You begin searching for signs, inconsistencies, hidden meanings, possible rejection. And suddenly, the love you said you wanted begins to feel less like a blessing and more like a threat. This is the paradox most people never understand. The conscious mind can desire love deeply, while the nervous system still associates closeness with danger. So the question is not only, do I want love? The deeper question is, can my body feel safe when love is actually present? Because sometimes what pushes love away is not a lack of desire. It is the part of you that learned long ago that connection could disappear, change, disappoint, overwhelm, or hurt. And if love once felt unpredictable, your system may confuse peace with danger, stability with boredom, and genuine presence with something unfamiliar. So before you ask why love keeps slipping away, ask this. Is love rejecting you? Or is your body rejecting the safety it has not yet learned to trust? What if wanting love has never been your problem? Most people believe that desire is the driving force behind manifestation. That if you want something badly enough, if you think about it, visualize it, speak it into existence, it should eventually arrive. But here is where the deeper truth begins to unfold. Desire alone does not create your reality. Capacity does. You can crave connection with intensity and still be unable to hold it when it appears. You can call love into your life, and yet, without realizing it, begin to destabilize at the moment it becomes real. Not because you are broken, but because your internal system has not yet expanded to feel safe receiving what you ask for. This is where the principles of energy and co-creation become undeniable. Reality does not respond to what you want, it responds to what you can sustain. Your emotional body, your nervous system, your unconscious patterns, these are the true filters through which love must pass. And if those filters are conditioned by uncertainty, inconsistency, or emotional survival, then even the most aligned connection can feel overwhelming, confusing, or too much to trust. So instead of asking, why isn't love coming to me? Consider a more powerful question. If love fully arrived today, would I feel grounded enough to receive it, or would I begin to contract? Because the moment you shift from chasing love to expanding your capacity to hold it, everything about your reality begins to change. If this perspective is already shifting something inside you, take a moment to subscribe and like this video. It helps this message reach those who are ready to receive it. Have you ever noticed how your thoughts say yes, but your body quietly says no? You tell yourself you're ready. You affirm it. You believe it, at least on the surface. You want the relationship, the closeness, the emotional intimacy. And yet, when it begins to unfold, something deeper starts to resist, not through logic, but through sensation. Your chest tightens. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your mind starts scanning for problems that may not even exist. This is not confusion. This is a conflict between two different systems operating at the same time. Your mind is future-oriented. It is imaginative, aspirational, capable of creating visions of what could be. But your body is historical. It is shaped by memory, by emotional imprint, by every moment where connection felt uncertain, overwhelming, or unsafe. So when love begins to appear, your mind recognizes the opportunity, but your nervous system recognizes a pattern. And here is where quantum-level co-creation becomes deeply personal. You are not only projecting intentions into reality, you are broadcasting emotional signals through your physiology. Your body is constantly communicating with the field, not through words, but through frequency. If your internal state is activated, guarded, or bracing for impact, that signal shapes how you perceive, respond, and even influence the connection in front of you. So the real question becomes, are you trying to think your way into love, or are you willing to retrain your body to feel safe inside it? Because true alignment is not when your mind says, I want this. It is when your body no longer feels the need to protect you from it. What if the reason you pull away from love is not because it's wrong, but because it feels too right in a way your system doesn't recognize? There is a moment that many people experience but rarely understand. Everything seems calm. The person is present, consistent, emotionally available. There are no games, no confusion, no intensity pulling you into emotional extremes. And yet something feels off. Not because anything is actually wrong, but because nothing is triggering what your system is used to. This is what we can call unsafe safety. It is the experience of encountering something genuinely healthy, while your internal conditioning quietly signals danger. Not because the situation is unsafe, but because it does not match the emotional patterns your body has learned to identify as familiar. And the human system, at its core, is not designed to choose what is best. It is designed to choose what is known. So if love once came with inconsistency, distance, emotional highs and lows, or the need to prove your worth, then a grounded and stable connection may feel empty or even suspicious. Your mind may begin to question it. Is there chemistry? Is something missing? Why doesn't this feel intense? But what you are actually experiencing is the absence of activation, not the absence of connection. And here is where a profound shift begins. What if peace is not a lack of love, but the highest expression of it? Because when you stop interpreting calm as disinterest and begin recognizing it as emotional safety, you open the door to a completely different kind of relationship, one that doesn't consume you, but finally allows you to breathe. Why does something unhealthy often feel more right than something that is actually good for you? There is a hidden mechanism guiding your choices, and it has very little to do with logic. Your system is not constantly evaluating what is healthiest, most aligned, or most nourishing. It is scanning for something far more primitive: recognition, familiarity. The nervous system is designed to prioritize what it knows, not what will help you grow. And this is where many people unknowingly recreate the same emotional experiences, even when they consciously want something different. Because what feels natural is often just what feels familiar. If you were conditioned in environments where love was inconsistent, where attention had to be earned, where emotional presence came and went unpredictably, your system adapted. It learned to associate connection with effort, tension, or uncertainty. And over time, that pattern became your internal reference point for what love is supposed to feel like. So, when a connection appears that is calm, consistent, and grounded, your system may not register it as right. It may register it as unfamiliar and therefore unsafe. This is where many people unintentionally turn away from what they actually need, while gravitating toward what reinforces their past. And here is the deeper insight. Your attraction is not always pointing toward alignment. It is often pointing toward repetition. So the question shifts again. Are you choosing based on what feels immediately compelling, or are you beginning to notice what feels quietly supportive, even if it doesn't activate you in the same way? Because transformation begins the moment you stop mistaking familiarity for truth. Have you ever wondered why, no matter what changes in your life, you seem to return to the same emotional level in love? You meet someone new. You feel hopeful, maybe even different this time. But slowly, almost invisibly, the dynamic begins to shift until it feels strangely familiar again. This is not coincidence. It is calibration. Just like a thermostat regulates temperature, your emotional system regulates how much love, closeness, and stability you can tolerate before it begins to self-correct. Not toward what you want, but toward what feels normal. This emotional thermostat is set over time through repeated experiences. It is shaped by what you had to adapt to, what you learned to expect, and what your body came to recognize as safe enough to survive. So if your internal setting is calibrated to inconsistency, emotional distance, or the need to earn connection, then anything beyond that level may trigger a subtle internal resistance. You might overthink. You might pull away. You might create distance where none existed. Not because you want to lose the connection, but because your system is trying to return to a level it knows how to handle. And here is where co-creation becomes deeply embodied. You are not just attracting experiences, you are regulating them in real time through your internal state. So the real question becomes, what level of love does your system currently allow without trying to reduce it? Because the moment you begin to consciously raise that threshold, not through force, but through safety, you stop resetting your reality and start expanding it. Have you ever asked yourself where your definition of love was actually formed? Not what you think love is, but what your body learned to expect from it. Long before you had the language to describe relationships, you were already feeling them. You were reading tone, presence, absence, emotional shifts. You were sensing when connection was available and when it wasn't. And in those early moments, something powerful began to take shape. A blueprint, not a conscious one, but a deeply embodied map of what love feels like, how it behaves, and what it requires from you in order to stay. Maybe love felt warm, but unpredictable. Maybe it was present one moment and distant the next. Maybe it required you to be quiet, to adapt, to perform, or to stay emotionally alert. Whatever the pattern was, your system didn't question it. It absorbed it. Because at that stage, love is not evaluated, it is internalized. And here is where the deeper layer of reality creation begins. Your subconscious does not distinguish between past and present in the way your conscious mind does. It simply runs the program that was written through repetition and emotional intensity. So when you find yourself in familiar dynamics today, it is not random. It is your internal blueprint seeking confirmation, seeking continuity, seeking resolution. Not because you consciously want it, but because your system is still trying to complete what once felt incomplete. So the question becomes more precise now. Are you responding to the person in front of you, or to a pattern that began long before they arrived? Because the moment you see the origin, you begin to loosen its hold. What if the version of you that shows up in love is not the real you, but the one who learned how to survive it? At some point, without even realizing it, you adapted. Not consciously, not strategically, but instinctively. You learned what kept connection from disappearing. You learned what reduced tension, what avoided rejection, what maintained a fragile sense of closeness. And slowly, those adjustments became part of your identity. You became more agreeable, more attentive, more careful with your words, your needs, your reactions. Not because that is who you truly are, but because that is who you needed to be in order to keep love from slipping away. And here is where the deeper distortion begins. Survival strategies are incredibly effective, but they come at a cost. Because while they may preserve connection, they often do so by suppressing authenticity. You start monitoring yourself, filtering your truth, softening your boundaries. And over time, the connection that remains is no longer fully rooted in who you are, but in who you became to maintain it. From the perspective of co-creation, this creates a subtle but powerful misalignment. You are not relating from your core frequency, but from a protective adaptation. And reality responds to that signal. So you may receive attention, affection, even validation, but something still feels incomplete. Because you are being received, but not fully seen. So here is the deeper question. If you removed the version of you that learned to survive love, what would remain? Because real connection does not require adaptation to be sustained. It requires presence, truth, and the safety to be exactly who you are. Have you ever felt an instant, powerful connection with someone and assumed it meant they were right for you? That magnetic pull, that intensity, that feeling of this is different. But what if that feeling is not alignment but recognition? Because what we often call chemistry is not always about compatibility. It is about familiarity activating at a deep, unconscious level. Your body is incredibly intelligent, but it is not always oriented toward growth. It is oriented toward what it knows how to navigate. So when you meet someone who carries a similar emotional pattern to what you experienced in the past, whether it's inconsistency, emotional distance, unpredictability, or intensity, your system lights up. Not because it's healthy, but because it's recognizable. It feels like something meaningful is happening, when in reality, something familiar is being reactivated. This is why certain connections feel instantly charged. They tap directly into unresolved emotional memory. They recreate the same internal sensations your system has been conditioned to interpret as connection. And from a co-creation perspective, this is where awareness becomes power. Because if you are unconsciously equating intensity with alignment, you may continue choosing dynamics that reinforce your past rather than expand your future. So the question begins to shift again. When you feel that strong pull, are you being drawn into something new, or are you being pulled back into something known? Because true alignment often feels quieter, less urgent, more grounded. And if you are not used to that frequency, you may overlook it completely. Not because it's not there, but because it doesn't activate what you've learned to recognize as love. Why does something that feels so powerful, so consuming, so undeniable, often lead to instability instead of connection? Because intensity can be deeply misleading. It can feel like truth, like certainty, like something you shouldn't question. Your thoughts become focused, your emotions heightened, your attention pulled entirely toward the other person. It feels alive, urgent, almost addictive. But intensity is not always a sign of alignment. It is often a sign of activation. When your nervous system encounters something that mirrors unresolved emotional patterns, it doesn't stay neutral. It reacts. It amplifies. It pulls you into a heightened state where everything feels more significant than it actually is. And in that state, clarity becomes distorted. You may interpret unpredictability as excitement, emotional distance as mystery, inconsistency as something to pursue or fix. But what is actually happening is that your system is trying to resolve something it has experienced before. From a co-creation perspective, this is where many people unintentionally reinforce the same outcomes. Because when you follow intensity without awareness, you are not choosing from presence, you are reacting from pattern. And patterns, when left unconscious, will always recreate themselves. So, here is the deeper distinction. Alignment feels steady. It allows space. It does not require you to lose yourself in order to maintain it. Intensity, on the other hand, often pulls you away from your center. It narrows your focus, increases emotional dependency, and creates a sense of urgency that overrides discernment. So the next time something feels overwhelmingly strong, pause and ask yourself, is this connection expanding me, or is it activating something I haven't yet resolved? Because real alignment doesn't overwhelm your system. It stabilizes it. Why does something stable, respectful, and consistent sometimes feel strangely unexciting? You meet someone who communicates clearly. They show up when they say they will. They don't create confusion, mixed signals, or emotional highs and lows. And yet, something inside you hesitates. You might find yourself questioning the connection. Is there enough chemistry? Why doesn't this feel intense? Am I missing something? But what if you're not missing anything at all? What if what feels off is actually the absence of what once felt normal? If your system was conditioned around emotional unpredictability, then peace does not immediately register as safety. It can register as unfamiliar, even dull, because your nervous system learned to associate connection with activation, with uncertainty, with something to figure out, chase, or stabilize. So, when none of that is present, your system doesn't relax right away. It searches. It looks for what's missing, not because something is wrong, but because it doesn't recognize calm as meaningful. This is where the deeper misunderstanding begins. You may interpret the lack of anxiety as a lack of connection. You may interpret emotional steadiness as a lack of depth. But in reality, what you are experiencing is emotional regulation, not emotional absence. From a co-creation perspective, this is a critical turning point. Because the kind of love that transforms your life is not the one that consumes your energy. It is the one that stabilizes your nervous system. So the real question becomes, can you allow yourself to stay in something that feels unfamiliar long enough for your system to realize it's safe? Because sometimes what feels off is not wrong. It's simply new. Have you ever caught yourself adjusting who you are just to keep someone interested? It rarely happens in obvious ways. It's subtle, gradual, almost invisible. You soften your opinions. You delay expressing what you truly feel. You become more agreeable, more accommodating, more aligned with what you think they might want. And at first, it seems harmless, even strategic. You tell yourself you're just being flexible, understanding, easy to be with. But underneath that adaptation, something deeper is happening. You are no longer showing up as you are. You are showing up as who you believe will be accepted. This is the perform version of you, a version shaped not by authenticity, but by anticipation. By reading the other person, predicting their reactions, and adjusting yourself to maintain connection. And here is where the disconnection quietly begins. Because when you are relating through performance, the connection you build is not with your true self. It is with the version you are presenting. So even if the other person responds positively, even if they like you, choose you, or stay, something still feels incomplete. Because deep down, you know they are not fully meeting you. They are meeting the version you curated. From a co-creation perspective, this creates a subtle distortion in your energetic signal. You are asking to be seen, but you are not fully revealing what needs to be seen. So the question becomes more honest now. Are you being chosen for who you are, or for who you've learned to be in order to be chosen? Because real connection doesn't require performance. It requires the courage to be visible without editing yourself first. Where do you slowly disappear without anyone else even noticing? Self-abandonment rarely looks dramatic. It doesn't arrive as a clear decision or a sudden loss of identity. It happens quietly, in the smallest moments. When you feel something but choose not to say it. When a boundary arises but you soften it to avoid discomfort. When your intuition whispers, but you override it to maintain harmony. These moments seem insignificant on their own, but over time, they accumulate into something much deeper. A gradual disconnection from yourself. You begin to prioritize the relationship over your internal truth. You stay agreeable when something feels off. You remain present externally, while internally, you are slowly stepping away from yourself. And this is where the paradox intensifies. You may still be in the connection. You may still be communicating, engaging, showing up. But the version of you inside that connection is no longer fully there. From an energetic perspective, this creates a subtle fracture. Because while you are seeking closeness with another person, you are simultaneously creating distance within yourself. And reality reflects that disconnection. You may feel unseen, misunderstood, or slightly unsettled, without knowing exactly why. But the deeper truth is this. You cannot be fully received in a place where you are no longer fully present. So the question becomes more precise now. In the moments that matter most, are you staying connected to yourself, or are you leaving yourself to keep the connection alive? Because real alignment begins the moment you choose not to abandon your truth, even when it feels uncomfortable to stay with it. Have you ever felt accepted by someone and yet somehow not truly known? They like you. They respond well to you. They appreciate your presence. And still, there's a quiet emptiness beneath it all. Because what you are receiving is approval, not connection. Approval is conditional. It is based on how well you align with expectations, how easy you are to be with, how little friction you create. It rewards the version of you that fits, adapts, and maintains comfort. But real connection is something entirely different. It does not require you to shape yourself into something more acceptable. It requires you to be seen in your fullness, your truth, your complexity, your boundaries, your depth. And here is where the subtle shift occurs. When you begin prioritizing approval, you start organizing your behavior around how you are perceived. You become more attentive to their reactions than to your own internal signals. You ask consciously or not, do they like me? Am I doing this right? Am I enough for them? And in doing so, you move further away from a much more powerful question. Do I feel aligned here? From a co-creation perspective, this is where your energy becomes externally referenced. Your sense of value begins to depend on how you are received, rather than how you are rooted within yourself. So, even when approval is present, stability is not. Because approval can be gained and lost. But connection, real connection, emerges when you no longer need to earn your place. So, ask yourself honestly, are you being valued for who you are, or for how well you've learned to be accepted? Because only one of those creates something real. What if the very behaviors you're trying to fix were never problems to begin with? What if they were protection? Think about it. The overthinking, the need for control, the moments you pull away or the moments you hold on too tightly. These patterns didn't appear randomly. They were built carefully, intelligently by a system that was trying to keep you safe. At some point, being alert helped you anticipate emotional shifts. Overanalyzing helped you avoid being caught off guard. Creating distance protected you from getting too attached or too exposed. And even the opposite, becoming overly available, overly giving, overly invested, can be a strategy to maintain connection and reduce the risk of loss. Every pattern has a purpose. But here is where the misunderstanding begins. What once protected you can now limit you, because the system that learned to survive in one environment continues to operate in another, even when the conditions have changed. From a co-creation perspective, this means you are not only responding to the present moment. You are responding through layers of past conditioning that are still active within your nervous system. So when you find yourself reacting in ways that feel automatic, disproportionate, or confusing, instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" ask something more precise. What is this part of me trying to protect me from? Because the moment you recognize the intelligence behind your patterns, you stop fighting yourself and begin working with your system instead of against it. And that is where true transformation begins, not by eliminating your patterns, but by understanding them well enough to no longer need them. Why does it feel like the more one person moves closer, the more the other pulls away? This dynamic is not random. It is one of the most common relational patterns, yet it often feels deeply personal when you are inside it. One person seeks closeness to feel safe. The other creates distance to feel safe. And both believe they are simply responding to the other, when in reality, both are responding to their own internal conditioning. The anxious side feels the absence of connection quickly. Even small changes in tone, attention, or availability can trigger a sense of instability. So it moves closer, seeking reassurance, clarity, presence. But to the avoidant side, that movement can feel overwhelming. Not because the connection is wrong, but because closeness activates something within them that feels like a loss of control or autonomy. So they pull away. And the moment they pull away, the anxious system intensifies its effort to reconnect. Closer, more attention, more urgency, which then triggers more distance. And just like that, a loop is formed. From the outside, it looks like incompatibility. But at a deeper level, it is two protective systems interacting, each trying to regulate its own sense of safety. From a co-creation perspective, this loop sustains itself through emotional feedback. Each person's reaction confirms the other's internal belief about connection. So the pattern continues not because either person intends it, but because both are unconsciously maintaining it. So the question becomes, Are you reacting to the other person or participating in a dynamic that your system already knows? Because the moment you step out of automatic reaction, the loop begins to lose its momentum. Why does everything begin to shift the moment you place someone above you? At first, it feels subtle. You admire them. You appreciate their qualities. You feel drawn to their presence. But slowly, without noticing, that admiration starts to transform into something else. You begin to elevate them. Their opinions carry more weight than yours. Their attention feels more valuable than your own self-connection. Their approval starts to influence how you see yourself. And in that moment, something fundamental changes. You move out of your center. The pedestal effect is not about valuing someone. It's about unconsciously diminishing yourself in the process. It creates an energetic imbalance where one person is perceived as more important, more desirable, or more complete. And from a co-creation perspective, this shift is powerful. Because the moment you place someone above you, your internal state changes. Your behavior adjusts. Your energy becomes oriented around maintaining their interest rather than expressing your truth. You become more careful, more reactive, more dependent on their response. And this creates a subtle contraction in your presence. The paradox is that the more you elevate them, the more you disconnect from the very qualities that made you magnetic in the first place. Because true connection is built on a quality of presence, not hierarchy. So the question becomes clear. Are you relating to this person from your center or from a position where you've already given away your power? Because the moment you return to your own value, not as an idea, but as a felt state, the dynamic begins to recalibrate, not through control, but through alignment. What if one question could interrupt every pattern you've been repeating without force, without strategy, without chasing? Most people move through connection focused on one central concern. Do they like me? It seems natural, almost automatic. You observe their behavior, their tone, their level of interest. You analyze signals, look for confirmation, and adjust yourself accordingly. But this question does something subtle and powerful. It places your center of gravity outside of you. Your emotional state becomes dependent on their responses. Your sense of direction becomes shaped by their reactions. And without realizing it, you begin organizing your behavior around being chosen. Now, consider what happens when you shift the question, not to something complex, but to something deeply honest. Do I feel safe here? Do I feel respected? Do I feel aligned with who I am in this space? This is not a surface-level change. It is a complete reorientation of your awareness. Because now, instead of scanning outward for approval, you begin listening inward for truth. From a co-creation perspective, this shift changes your entire signal. You are no longer approaching connection from lack or uncertainty. You are relating from presence, from self-awareness, from internal alignment. And that changes what you allow, what you respond to, and what you naturally move toward. So the question is no longer about whether you are enough for them. The question becomes, is this connection aligned with the version of me I am becoming? Because the moment you start asking that, you stop repeating old patterns and start creating new ones. What would change if you stopped organizing your behavior around being chosen and started choosing yourself instead? This is where everything begins to shift. Up until this point, much of your attention may have been directed outward, toward reading signals, adjusting responses, maintaining connection, preventing loss. Even in subtle ways, Your energy has been oriented around securing something outside of you. But returning to yourself is not a concept. It is a decision that unfolds moment by moment. It begins when you notice where you are abandoning your truth to maintain harmony. It deepens when you pause before reacting and ask what you actually feel, not what would be most acceptable. It stabilizes when your actions start to reflect your internal alignment rather than external validation. And this is where co-creation becomes embodied. Because reality does not respond to the version of you that seeks approval. It responds to the version of you that is internally coherent. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions begin to align around your truth, your signal becomes clear. Not loud, not forceful, but consistent. And consistency creates stability. So instead of asking how to keep someone interested, you begin asking something more grounded. Am I staying connected to myself in this moment? Because every time you choose yourself, not in isolation, but in integrity, you recalibrate your internal state. You move from seeking to embodying. And from that place, connection is no longer something you chase. It becomes something that meets you where you already stand. What would happen if, instead of reacting immediately, you allowed yourself to feel first? Most reactions in relationships are not responses to the present moment. They are echoes of something older, something stored in the body, waiting to be triggered. A delayed reply, a shift in tone, a moment of distance. And suddenly, your system moves. Your mind fills the gap with meaning. Your body prepares for loss, rejection, or instability. And before you even realize it, you are reacting, not from clarity, but from activation. This is where most patterns reinforce themselves. But what if you interrupted that sequence? Not by suppressing the reaction, but by pausing long enough to feel what is actually happening inside you. Because beneath every reaction, there is an emotion that has not yet been fully processed. Anxiety, fear, uncertainty, a need for reassurance. And when you allow yourself to experience that emotion without immediately trying to fix it, express it, or act on it, something begins to shift. From a co-creation perspective, this is where you move from unconscious reaction to conscious creation. Because when you are no longer driven by immediate emotional impulses, your responses become intentional. You stop amplifying old patterns. You stop feeding the same dynamics. You begin creating space between stimulus and response. And in that space, you gain power. So the question becomes, can you sit with what you feel without needing to resolve it right away? Because transformation doesn't begin with action. It begins with awareness strong enough to hold emotion without becoming it. Why does doing the right thing in love sometimes feel completely wrong? You set a boundary and immediately feel guilt. You speak your truth, and your body tightens. You choose not to chase, and it feels like you're losing control. And in those moments, it's easy to assume you made a mistake. But what if that discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong, but a sign you're doing something new? Your nervous system is not calibrated to what is healthy. It is calibrated to what is familiar. So when you begin to act in ways that are aligned, ways that honor your needs, your boundaries, your truth, your system doesn't immediately recognize it as safe. It recognizes it as different. And difference at a biological level can feel like risk. This is why growth often feels like tension before it feels like expansion. Because you're stepping outside of patterns that once maintained stability, even if that stability came at the cost of your authenticity. From a co-creation perspective, This is where most people retreat. They interpret discomfort as misalignment and return to what feels easier, more natural, more known. But what they are returning to is the very pattern they're trying to change. So the question becomes critical here. Are you willing to stay with the discomfort long enough for your system to recalibrate? Because what feels unfamiliar today can become your new baseline tomorrow. And once it does, the version of you that once felt difficult becomes the version that feels like home. Why does love feel easy to imagine, but difficult to hold? Because receiving love is not just an emotional experience, it is a physiological one. You don't receive love only with your mind. You receive it with your body, with your capacity to stay open when someone gets close, with your ability to remain grounded when care is offered without conditions, with your willingness to let something good exist without preparing for its loss. And this is where many people struggle, not in attracting love, but in sustaining it. Because if your internal state is bracing, guarding, or anticipating disruption, then even the most genuine connection will feel unstable inside you. You may question it. You may test it. You may unconsciously create distance. Not because the love is insufficient, but because your body has not yet learned that it is safe to relax within it. From a co-creation perspective, this is fundamental. You do not hold what you desire. You hold what your system believes is safe. And safety is not created through logic. It is built through repeated experiences of presence, regulation, and internal consistency. So the shift is not about finding someone who loves you more. It is about becoming someone who can remain open when love is already there. So ask yourself honestly, when something good begins to unfold, do you allow yourself to receive it fully? Or do you begin preparing for when it might end? Because the capacity to receive is not given to you. It is something you build from within. What if everything you've called love was actually something else? What if what you've been chasing, analyzing, holding on to, or trying to fix was never love in its true form? Because for many people, love has been confused with intensity, with urgency, with emotional highs and lows that create a sense of meaning through instability. If it feels strong, it must be real. If it feels overwhelming, it must be important. If it consumes your attention, it must be love. But what if that intensity is not depth but activation? What if it is your nervous system responding to familiar patterns, patterns that feel significant not because they are aligned, but because they are deeply known? True love does not operate from urgency. It does not require you to prove, chase, or stabilize it. It is not built on unpredictability or emotional extremes. Real love is something much quieter, but far more powerful. It is steady. It is consistent. It allows space without creating distance. It does not pull you out of yourself. It allows you to remain fully within yourself. From a co-creation perspective, redefining love is a shift in frequency. Because when you stop equating love with activation, you begin to recognize a different signal entirely. A sense of calm, a feeling of grounded presence, a connection that does not demand constant attention to sustain itself. So the question becomes clear now. Are you drawn to what feels intense, or are you beginning to recognize what feels stable? Because the love that transforms your life is not the one that overwhelms your system. It is the one that allows your system to finally rest. What finally changes when you stop abandoning yourself to be loved? There comes a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when something inside you no longer negotiates your truth for connection. You don't force it. You don't declare it. You simply stop leaving yourself. And in that moment, everything begins to reorganize. You no longer chase intensity to feel something. You no longer interpret distance as something to fix. You no longer adjust your identity to maintain someone's presence. Because your reference point has shifted. You are no longer asking, "How do I keep this?" You are grounded in, "Does this meet me where I am?" This is the final shift, not in behavior, but in identity. You are no longer relating from the version of you that learned to survive love. You are relating from the version of you that can hold it without losing yourself inside it. And from a co-creation perspective, this is where reality begins to respond differently. Because your signal is no longer mixed. There is no internal contradiction between what you want and what you allow. There is no silent negotiation happening beneath your words. You are coherent. And coherence creates clarity in your choices, in your boundaries, in what you naturally attract and sustain. So love no longer feels like something fragile, something you might lose if you misstep. It becomes something stable because you are stable within it. And here's the truth that changes everything. You don't receive love when someone finally chooses you. You receive love when you stop abandoning yourself to keep it. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and stay connected for more insights that transform how you experience love and reality. Like this video to support the growth of this content and help it reach those who are ready for this shift. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them.